Hello. It's a privilege to be asked to attend this final session today. And I've got a real heartfelt interest in nephrons and nephronophthisis. Can everybody hear me? Yes, okay.
Yes.
Mike, just to briefly share our story before I pass over to Rodney. My daughter Katie, back in 2008, was a very poorly child, and over the early years saw many doctors, but diagnosis was inconclusive. Finally, a lovely Basingstoke paediatrician took more bloods from Katie just before we went away on holiday. And it was on our return from our holiday, I was in a supermarket with my children at the checkout, paying for the shopping when my mobile phone rang. And it was the paediatrician who simply said, "Please bring her now, right now." It was a moment I'll never forget. A few hours later, we were informed that Katie had a very rare renal disease, juvenile nephronophthisis type 1, and that she would soon need a kidney transplant. And so began our life's most adventurous journey. So we were looked after by the lovely renal team at Southampton Children's Hospital. So I know Arvin, Schumann and Rodney very well. And we had the same team for a whole decade, which was very precious. And they really helped us learn to live with what we affectionately called our cloud on a string. They really did become our extended family. There's only a real small amount of information about nephronophthisis. It's only recently been added to the Rare Renal Registry, and it suggested an average age of renal failure at 13. But Katie proved to be anything but average. 13 years came and went, and she continued to surpass all her consultants' predictions. In the meantime, I was found to be an almost perfect 1-0-0 match, and with great relief, signed up to be a body part in waiting. Katie was one of the very first recruits to the Ready Steady Go programme. We even helped choose the colour scheme. And it's a fantastic programme. It transformed her from a frankly shy and very frightened child to one with confidence and attitude and a willingness to battle with her consultants if she disagreed, which Arben will relate to because she did it regularly. It's a fighting spirit that still stays with her today. She transitioned to adults just after her 18th birthday, and I donated her one of my kidneys just 3 weeks after her final A-level exam. Difficult time made bearable by tremendous support of our medical team. Katie was the adult team's youngest transplant patient for a decade. That was 4 years ago. Since transplant, she's interrailed around Europe and been to university to study geography. Soon to graduate, she's just achieved a first for her dissertation, and she's an amazing young lady who embraces all life has to offer. She loves water sports and kayaking, and I did have a photo Arvin was meant to show, but I'm not sure where that is. But as she steps into the next chapter of life, she does so safe in the knowledge that her trusted medical team, and you met one of them today, Dr. Kirsty Armstrong, Portsmouth, lovely lady, are behind her all the way. So although I can't see you all out there, for all of you listening, I sincerely thank you as a parent. You are the hope for the future for all the children and young adults like Katie. So thank you. And without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce one of our lovely team from Southampton Consultants, Dr. Rodney Gilbert. He had some amazing, there's Katie's picture. That's Katie post-transplant, loving her kayaking, looking very well, I'm pleased to say. So Rodney had some amazing conversations with English literature with Katie over the decade she was with them. But I'm pleased to say today he's looking at more medical subjects. So over to Rodney. Thank you.
Thank you very much, both to Jenny and to Michelle for that very kind introduction. Nephronophthisis means wasting or dwindling of the nephrons, as Jenny would be able to tell you. My Greek isn't as good as hers, but I do know that. So I would very briefly like to present a 13-year-old boy who presented to us with severe hypertension, which was discovered when consideration was being given to starting treatment for ADHD. And he was then found to have a significant CKD. Urine dip showed nothing. Kidneys were fairly echogenic with no abnormal dilatation. And he had significant kidney impairment and anemia. So he was ferociously hypertensive. He was very overweight, and there was a lot of uncertainty diagnostically. So we did do a biopsy, which basically showed end-stage kidney. But we also sent genetics, which showed a compound heterozygous pathogenic variant of INVS, which is also known as NPHP2. And he is the first child that we've actually biopsied who's had a diagnosis of nephronophthisis for, it must be about 15 years. So he had a diagnosis of type 2 nephronophthisis, and unfortunately his kidney function has continued to deteriorate, and he's likely to start dialysis in the relatively near future. So juvenile nephronophthisis, most commonly caused by NPHP1, which was the case in Katie, who you've just heard about, is considered the commonest monogenic cause of end-stage kidney disease in children. The incidence seems to vary quite dramatically. I was unable to find incidence figures for the UK, but it's quoted as approximately 1 in 1 million in America, but 1 in 50,000 in Canada. And with NPHP1 mutation, certainly there's a median age of end-stage kidney disease, or so the textbooks would have us believe, of 13 years. And until recently, this was very much thought of as a pediatric disease. Now, nephronophthisis belongs to a group of conditions which we often talk about as ciliopathies, where mutations are related to proteins involved with the primary cilium. And these conditions, there's a wide phenotypic and genotypic spectrum of conditions. And I list here some of the syndromic versions of nephronophthisis. I won't go into them in great detail, but the same genes can cause nephronophthisis with completely normal eyes, but NPHP1 mutations can also result in senior Loken syndrome. And there's a lot of genotypic overlap in these syndromes, and partly that can be explained by allelic variation, and partly the fact that you have numerous genes causing very similar clinical pictures sometimes relates to the fact that all of these proteins tend to work in large multi-protein complexes. So a mutation in one can disrupt functioning of other proteins in the complex and give a very similar clinical picture. And these conditions have sometimes been referred to as hepatorenal fibrocystic diseases. And just to give you an example of the confusion, adolescent nephronophthisis, when I was a much younger man, this was said to be vanishingly rare, only described in a single Venezuelan kindred with a mean stage of end-stage kidney disease of 19 years. But in the interim, there have been a number of reports, and nearly all of them have been of children presenting very early in life with severe multi-system disease with a very high mortality rate. So the clinical spectrum of this condition is also very wide. So nephronophthisis is a phenotypically and genotypically heterogeneous group of conditions, and it is not only a pediatric condition. And we know that because we have an adult nephrologist who's about to talk to us about nephronophthisis. So I will leave that little introduction there, and Professor Isaiah will be talking to us in more detail about this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rodney, for the fantastic introduction. And thank you, Michelle, for sharing your story. It was lovely. I'll hand over to Neil to introduce the next speaker then.
Jenny, before you do, I think we are owed the Greek pronunciation of the disease we're talking about, because I think we've heard 3 pronunciations already.
That's fine. Nephronophthisis. It's quite